Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My guest in this episode is Rick Drumm, professional drummer and longtime music industry professional and entrepreneur. Here is Rick Drumm. Welcome, Rick. Thank you so much for being on my show. So, shaping your journey. Before we get going, tell us, where did it start? What was that foundation? What was that first spark that set this off for you?
Yeah, I would say that the first spark for me was my father, Ronnie, who had a music store. He had a big band. He was a contractor. He was a great trumpet player. And he taught his students trumpet. And then he had other teachers in his store. And so I started taking trumpet lessons at the age of 4. And he had high expectations. And his first words to me every single day when he would come home from the store were, did you practice today? And, not hi, how you doing? Did you practice today? Did you practice today? And at first, I didn't appreciate those words, but then I embraced them. So I think that helped the spark. And then my earliest memories really were of going to see him and his big band. And he had a great, great big band. And going to the club, watching the rehearsals. And so that's kind of the environment that I grew up in. It was music pretty much from day one. And so I was very fortunate to have him as a dad. And actually my 2 brothers and sister were also musical and still are. One brother passed, but the other brother, Ronnie, he created a great career for himself down at Disney World, not as a musician, but as a manager. And my sister Eileen is a great pianist and also works in another occupation as well. And so we all grew up with it, and really fantastic. I had some great early experiences growing up. In that I had a great drum teacher early on by the name of Dominic Tieni, who was a student of George Stone.
Wow, nice.
Yes, I was introduced to those techniques early on, and then as I continued, I started playing professionally when I was 13. And also started playing rodeos and circuses when I was 14 years old. And so I was introduced to, well, basically I knew how to play a 10-second tune, playing the rodeos.
Right.
And also playing for the rodeo clowns while they're trying to save some cowboy's life to divert the bull, and then playing circuses, starting with the Shriner Circus when I was 14. And there was a guy that was a conductor by the name of Boom Boom Browning. And Boom Boom at one time was a rep for Slingerland too. And he was a little overweight. I'll just put it that way.
Okay. Boom, boom. Wow.
And before I started playing the shows, I used to watch him conduct the shows. And he used to conduct the shows with the downbeats and the cutoffs with his stomach. So the band had to focus in on his stomach for the beginning of the tune and the end of the tune. And sometimes he jiggled, so the cutoffs were a little iffy, but
depending on which side you're facing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's original. It's definitely original. But it's really interesting, Rick, and I don't know if I ever told you this. I mean, we've known each other for a while, but I always found it so cool and interesting that your name is Rick Drum and you're a drummer. That is that is
I know it's just it's very fortunate the way it worked out. Because I had stayed on the trumpet, it wouldn't have meant much. But I switched over to drums.
yeah, yeah.
I was able to benefit from the marketing value of the name. My father, not so much.
Right. I'll tell you something. Not too many people know this, but the word matzah, which is my last name, is a big stick, like a sledgehammer, like that at mass.
Oh.
So it's a big stick. I'm not that big, but the name is. Interesting, but it's interesting that your first instrument was trumpet, which is interesting. In my case, it was a bugle. I was in a marching band playing bugle, and I always had my eyes on the drummers, and they would never let me play drums because they had way too many drummers. But I would always ask them to show me things in case one of them never showed up, so I'd be ready. And then it never got to that. I started playing in rock bands before that ever happened as a drummer.
Well, the reason I switched over to drums was I was visiting a cousin's house, and they had a couple of horses, and one of my cousins would like to walk on the top of the corral going all the way around.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that looks kind of cool. I think I can balance. So I made it all the way around, and then I didn't. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground. The world was spinning, and my left arm, I mean, it went like this.
Ah,
So I said, well, that's not good. And so they took me to the hospital. They reset my arm. And, like so many others, right? So the Beatles were hitting right about that time. And uh, my brothers and sisters and I were mimicking the Beatles
of
being
course.
kids. And my father, I was kind of playing the role of Ringo. And my father said, would you like to play the drums? And I
Beautiful.
thought, well, yeah. And he said, I think it'd be good to rehab your arm as well. So for a
Interesting.
while, I played both trumpet and drums. I started to take those drum lessons. And then I said, Pops, I think my future's in drumming.
Nice. Nice. And did you study formally after that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I studied first with Dominic Dieni, and then I studied with another great drummer in the area up here in Springfield, Massachusetts, by the name of Joe Raish, who was also he played with Warren Covington and the Tommy Dorsey band and all that type of stuff. And then uh, they both said to me it was time for me to find another level of teacher. And so they recommended that I contact Joe Morello,
Okay.
Ed Shaughnessy, and a guy that was a teacher down at Hart School of Music, Al Lepak.
Okay. Okay. Alexander Lipak, yes.
Yeah, I guess Al had taught Emil and Joe
Right.
Picaro. So
That's right.
I I ended up choosing Ed Shaughnessy, and so I reached out to Ed, and he took me on as a student. And I, at the time, between the eighth grade and ninth grade during that summer, I saw a small little article in Downbeat magazine talking about the National Endowment for the Arts travel study grant. And so if you were going to travel someplace to study with an artist or a musician, you could apply. Anyway, I won, and I was awarded a grant, and I was 14, and I was one of 28 people in the country that was awarded this grant. And so it gave me some funding to help pay for my lessons with Ed. And so I would take the bus down to New York from Springfield, which is about 3.5 hour bus ride, and get down there early in the morning and walk around the streets, look for street musicians, you know, and you take the bus into Port Authority, and then 42nd Street back then
42nd
was very
Street,
different than
right?
it is
Yeah.
today.
Yes. I remember it well. We have
And
stories on 42nd Street.
I grew up a lot on 42nd Street. So anyway, I'd wait for my lesson with Ed, which was around 1:30 in the afternoon or 1 o'clock. And I'd go over, take my lesson, an hour, hour and a half. And then I'd walk over to NBC Studios with him
Right.
over Rockefeller Center to watch the Tonight Show rehearsals.
Yeah. I'm just
Yeah,
I'm just going to interject a little bit. Some people don't know that the original show was filmed in New York, right? That's why Ed was there, and then they moved to Los Angeles with Johnny Carson, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with uh, when the show again was in New York, I used to sit behind Ed. There
Wow.
was actually a piece of the audience back then that was actually behind the band, and so I'd be there for the rehearsals, and he'd show me how he's marking up the chart. Well, we're cutting from here to here, and oh, we're going to do that again. And,
Beautiful.
that's where I was introduced to the eyeglass concept of marking the chart.
Yes.
But on the band back then was Snooky Young. Richard Davis was playing bass. Arnie Lawrence was one of the sax players, along with Tommy Newsom. And Clark Terry was a frequent substitute in the trumpet section. And then, of course, again, you had Doc Severinsen. And these guys, I was sitting right behind them as well. And so they would turn and occasionally talk to me. This is a kid that had a bad case of acne that was showing up every other week. Maybe we should say something to him. And so I never forget this. Uh, I was Clark Terry asked me about my lesson with Ed and what we went over, and then he asked me about my symbols, and he said, "So tell me about your symbols." And I said, "Well, there's Zildjian and bada bada boom." And he said, "No, tell me about the frequencies. Are they really
Interesting.
high frequencies? How do they blend together? Is there a lot of splash? What?" And I did my best in giving him um, the description, the sound descriptions. And then he said, "Well, there's certain frequencies that really are dissonant to me when I'm playing a solo from the drummer cymbals." And I said, "Well, if I ever get a gig with you, I'll keep that in mind." He never called.
Yes.
But there were some great lessons there, right?
Beautiful. And that's interesting because most people don't understand how valuable that is. I mean, I am very sensitive when it's the wrong symbol or it lasts too long.
Yeah.
So I had some cymbals made for me that were super short because I'd be playing and it's I don't have perfect pitch, but I can hear when it just doesn't sound right in that spectrum, or because I've done a lot of recording, so I'm always hearing about these pitches, and I tell all my students, we're playing drums, we're playing the percussion instruments, but it's not, forget melody and rhythm. It's all melody. It's
Yeah.
all melody, just organized in different ways. And
Right.
and then it becomes a cultural thing, but it's all melodies and those are all pitches. So it's interesting that you say that, and he gave you a really important lesson there. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then and every time I went, I picked up something. I'd see something in the production value of the show, or what was happening before the show, and then how people reacted to things that were occurring. And so for me, going forward, way down in the future of my career, I I never forgot that, and how much people had to prepare to create a really good product. In this case, it was a TV show,
Right.
right? And so when the Tonight Show moved out to Los Angeles, which was right in the summer of 1971, um, I had to get another teacher. and Ed recommended me to Sunny Igo.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
So now I studied with Ed starting in '69. And so it was about 2.5 years I was with Ed. And then, when the Tonight Show moved out west, you know, there was this studio hallway that was above Henry Adler's music. Do you remember Henry Adler's music?
Yes,
That was over
yes, yes, yes.
46th Street, right? And you had to go down a couple steps into Henry's store. And Henry was doing a lot of publishing
That's
at
right.
that time, right? For like the Louis Bellson, Gilbrin's modern reading text in 4/4 time.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I have all
So,
those books. Yes. Oh,
and
yes.
every once in a while, Henry would come up and sit in on my lesson. It was
Wow.
interesting. And um, that hallway, you went up the stairs, and there was just a dark hallway with one bare light bulb, and you had a chair underneath it. And I used to tell people, I think this is where the KGB uses at night. So the but the first studio on the left, when you got to the top of the stairs, was a mallet teacher, Doug Allen,
Okay.
who co-wrote the Phil Krause books, right? And then Ed Shaughnessy's studio was the first one on the right, and then it was Joe Casada's studio, and then
Wow.
Sandy Feldstein, and then at
Wow.
the end was Sonny Igo. And the person that had Sandy's studio before him was Saul Goodman.
Okay.
So a
Wow.
pretty rich
What a
lineage
lineage
there.
that is. And for those who are listening, Saul Goodman was the timpanist of New York Philharmonic. He was the grand teacher. And he actually taught in Montreal as well, Saul Goodman.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Quebec government asked him to be one of the first teachers here in the conservatory system, and he taught Louis Charbonneau, who became the timpanist for the Montreal Symphony,
Yeah.
and they became really really good friends, and then with Vic, Louis became really really good friends, and there's a little story behind that one too. But Saul Goodman was the main percussion teacher, timpanist in the classical world here, and then
Yeah.
they brought all the concepts of Delecluse here. So you had the really strong American drumming, and the French taste in that. So Montreal became like the crossroads of those two worlds. That's but wow, that's quite a mix you had there in those studios.
Yeah, it was incredible. But you mentioned something, and for the life of me, I'm sorry I can't remember this person's last name. He was from Montreal, and he was a drummer for the Ice Capades for many years. His name was Mo.
Mo, yes, I knew Mo very well. Mo Sloss, no, Mo, because he worked, he did the circuits, and then he worked at Steve's music shop.
Yep.
Yeah, I knew him well actually. I used to go into the store, and he used to scare everybody. I was this kid walking in the store, but he was such a really nice guy. But he just scared everybody because what do you
But
want?
but he, but
Yeah.
he was drumming for the Ice Capades, and I
Yes.
can't tell you how many shows I sat behind him watching him do that show. I learned a lot from him.
Mo.
He was always
Wow.
he always nice to me though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no. He was one of those guys that was a really nice guy, but very like, "What do you want, kid?" kind of thing. But if you got past that, he was the greatest guy, and he'd show you everything. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I remember walking into the store as a kid in that shop because I think he would work in the store when he was not on the road. Steve's music shop is like Manny's here. Yeah.
Yeah, been there many times.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I was also fortunate going back a little bit, or at the same time, when I was studying with Ed, there was another guy that I met that was local to Springfield, and he's still here. His name is Billy Arnold, and Billy was one of the original drummers with Junior Walker in the All Stars.
Okay.
Right, and I mean, so he did a tremendous amount of playing here. with well, it's Archie Shepp being
Right.
one of them, and he was good friends with Max Roach. Max was teaching at the University of Massachusetts at the time, and Billy couldn't read music very well, so we made a deal. I would teach him how to read, and he would teach me how to play. It was a
Nice.
good trade.
Yeah, yeah.
And he used to take me to all kinds of jam sessions when I was way underage, but make sure I got up there and played. Yeah, great.
Nice. Nice. I mean, all a collection of those guys. We had, I mean, a lot of those guys. Fortunately, Ed Shaughnessy, Joe Morello at COSA, many times.
Yeah.
And just spending time with those minds who are forever curious and always sharing everything they had. It was, like Jim Chapin,
Oh, yeah.
that whole generation of people that were just amazing and so giving of everything they had. They just brought all the baggage and said, "Here, take it, and please." It was nice.
Well, and I remember, all the trade shows that we attended, both at NAM and also over in Frankfurt. Um, you see Jim always with his pad and sticks, Dom Famularo, making sure that Jim didn't get into too much trouble. And then, um, but it was always a group of people,
Right.
kind of like the Pied Piper, right? And so you'd always sit down and have somebody play something, and then, he tweaked this or tweaked that, and just kind of give it away,
Yeah.
paying it forward, always.
Yeah. No, that was amazing. When you were like in all those years, did you ever think of? Because later on, you went into the industry part of it. I mean, being a president of the dairy and beyond, you did a lot of that stuff. What was that point? At what point did it come to you that you wanted to do that rather than be the player? Because you were around all of these great players and all these great personalities.
You know, um, my my journey, I went out of high school. I took a gig on the road for a year. Then I went into the Air Force
Ah,
and
right.
I played with the NORAD band for 4 years. And NORAD was what they call a special band, in that we had Army, Navy, Air Force, and Canadian Armed Forces. So we spent a lot of time touring through Canada and the entire United States. And when I got out of NORAD, uh, actually, I should preface this. A couple of years after I went into the Air Force, my father closed up the music store and he became conductor of Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, the Blue Unit. And so I was just now entering my last year with NORAD, and he called me up and said the drummer that they had been using had done the gig for like 6 years, and he wanted to get off the road, but he was giving my father a full year notice.
Okay.
So my father calls me up and says, "Well, you think you'd be interested in doing the gig when you get out?" And I said, it was making it sound like prison. I said, but yeah, I
Right.
I said, yeah. So the Air Force actually let me out about 3 months early so I could do the gig, which worked out great. And so I did 2 years, about 1,100 shows with Ringling Brothers at 3 hours a pop. And my goal all the way through this was to be a studio drummer. That's what I wanted to get to. And while I was with Ringling Brothers, I got endorsements from Remo, and then Zildjian and Ludwig. And so Remo, Lloyd McCausland, which you'll remember, right?
Yes, yes.
Lloyd started sending me products to test on while I'm playing the show. So like I had a 26-inch timpani that I was using as my floor tom tom and catching all the glissandos and everything for the axe.
Right.
And then They send me heads, and I write up reports on the heads and send them back. They send me more stuff. And so that was the really the very beginning of starting a relationship with Remo. And after I got off the show, I did 2 years. My father did 7 years. I went to my father at the beginning of the second year. I said, Dad, this is going to be my last year doing the show. I've got to play a whole song again. Because all we did for 2 years was play snippets. And I
Right,
said, I
right,
need to play a whole song that doesn't end in a B flat chord. I need something different.
right, right.
So after I got off the show, I spent a couple of years down in Sarasota. And I taught at a music store, Huff's Music. And I was playing about 6 nights a week with a singer-songwriter and some other bands. And did a little recording down there, and then made the decision to move out to Los Angeles. It was either going to be New York or LA.
Right, right.
And my first wife didn't like the cold, so LA won. And we had a newborn daughter. Um, and I need to get a job real quick. So I
Right.
called Remo, and they hired me for entry level in customer service. Now, my goal again was to be a studio drummer, but when I got out to LA, that's when I really found out there were about 10 guys doing all the work, and my name wasn't one of the 10. So,
And there's a
but
lot
I
of
was gigging.
competition.
I was able
Yeah.
to get a gig here, a gig there, and over time I built that up. But while I was working at Remo in customer service, and I was dealing with people's problems, and I became completely infatuated with all things business, totally unexpected, not planned. And I wanted to learn everything about uh, manufacturing, product development, um, artist relations, the whole thing.
Right.
And Remo saw that. And so he started to give me some opportunities, some more responsibilities. So over a period of time, I kind of started to rise through the company till I became director of sales and marketing globally for the company. Right, and it was interesting. I mean, one story from that time period was, um, we weren't doing when I first joined Remo, which was in '81. We weren't doing much in the way of clinics at the time,
Right.
and we had the pre-tuned drum system.
I
That,
remember. Yes.
yeah,
And I still have some of those heads that Lloyd gave me actually back
yeah,
because I was endorsing Remo back then. And he says, you got to try these. And they were pre tuned heads.
yeah.
Wow. That was amazing idea. Amazing idea.
Yeah, and so uh, Remo said, Rick, I think we should do a clinic. I said, oh, wow, that's a great idea, Remo. Um, who are we going to have in the clinic? He said, I think we should have Billy Cobham, Louis Bellson, and Vic Firth. I said, wow, that's a hell of a lineup. Where do we want to do the clinic? He said, New York City. I think we should do it in Manhattan. Oh, that's great. When? He said, 30 days, put it together.
No, no pressure.
No, no pressure. So I knew I had to get a place. I called the city of New York and ended up at the Sheraton Center, Midtown. And then well, first of all, I had to get a date where all three of them could make it. So I was
Sure.
calling Louie and Billy and Vic, got the date. And uh, then I knew I had to get people. So I used to be a member of Local 802, and they had an answering service where you could leave messages for everybody. And so I said, I'd like to leave a message for all the drummers in the local that on this date, we're going to have Louis Belson, Billy Cobham, and Vic Firth. And please come on down. Remo Belly personally
Right, right.
invites you. All right. So then I got Remo's Rolodex. right? So for all the people that may see this that don't know what a Rolodex is, right? It's like, 3 by 5 cards where you had phone numbers and people's names on them and alphabetized, hopefully.
Right.
So I asked Jackie Stein, who was Remo's assistant, um,
Yes.
to get me Remo's Rolodex. And I just started calling everybody that I had ever heard of out of that Rolodex in New York.
Right.
So I called Max Roach, I called Elvin Jones, Charlie Persip, Charlie Perry, Sonny Igo, everybody. And Mel Lewis.
Wow.
And I,
Nice.
and then, when we did the gig the next day, uh, Remo couldn't believe the turnout and he couldn't believe who came. And so he asked, "So what did you do?" So I took him through the whole thing, and he said, "Oh, okay." The next thing I know, I was artist relations manager.
Yeah. Well, Remo was like that. I don't think Remo ever slept. He was a thinker and always on it. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. I mean, when I think of all the people, I'll always be appreciative of the fact that he recognized the fact that I was interested and I had some ambition and I was self-motivated and I wasn't afraid to take risks. I wasn't afraid to, you know, screw up and ask for forgiveness and so forth,
Right.
which I did plenty of.
Yeah. And I'm
Uh,
sure you never said, "Oh, that's going to be hard."
no,
No, that's key.
never. The one time he came to my office, his office was directly across the hall from mine. And he's standing in the door frame with his hand up against the door and he's not saying anything. So now I know I'm supposed to notice something. And so I'm not really picking up on it. And then he points to his belt. And his belt was made out of the Quadura covering, that which was waste, it was scraps. That he couldn't stand waste, and he had to make something out of it. So he decided we were going to go into the belt business, and he was using the Remo um, logo that we put on the drums as the belt buckle. And he took he took like a can opener and he
This
made
is the
a
first time I hear this, Rick. That's beautiful. Okay. I know Remo, so why? Of course, of course.
yeah. So Remo's then asked me, "So what do you think?" And I said, I think everything that you tested in the 50s and the 60s is kicking in right now.
Way ahead. Right.
So I ended up doing 13 years at Remo. And then uh, I went down, well, before that, I went down to San Antonio. He asked me to move to San Antonio. We had a small manufacturing and distribution center in San Antonio. And so I ran that for a while with the plan that Remo wanted to move the company out of LA,
Okay.
right? Because of a number of issues that the company was having, everything from workers' comp to um, chemical usage and stuff like that. And
Right.
so we had planned to move to San Antonio, and I was kind of spearheading that. And then uh, where they are now in Valencia, they stepped in and said, "No, no, we'd like to have you out here." And so they put a nice economic development package to help the company move out to Valencia and into where they are now. And so then uh, my wife and I, my second wife, Betsy, and I decided we weren't going to go back to LA. And so that's when I got hired by Midco International, a distribution company up in Illinois. And I became CEO of that for 3 years. And then I went to a Pacific Arts, what am I saying? Percussion Arts um, show in Phoenix.
Right.
And we were importing a line of African percussion out of Ghana that we named Kambala. And um, I was manning the booth because there wasn't really anybody that knew what the heck that was.
Okay.
So I left the booth and I went to get a cup of coffee at concessions. And as I'm walking back down the aisle, Vic first comes out of his booth and says, I mean, just like this. Hey, Rick, let me hit you with something out of left field. What's up, Vic? How'd you like to become president of my company and come run my company for me?
Just like that.
Just like that. And I said, no, hi, how are you doing? Can we get a room, talk about it?
Wow.
So and that's exactly how it happened. And so it took a year for us to put it together because I couldn't just leave Midco. I had them in transition with moving distribution centers, new phone system, new computer system, all of that stuff. And so after the year, then I moved up to Massachusetts, where I'm originally from, and joined Vic's company, and as a president, and uh, I was there for 10 years, and it was a great team. I mean, going from like Remo, and then mid goes Lowell Samuel, who you may not have known, but
No.
Lowell was one of those guys. It's an older guy who had no fear of asking anything of anybody at any time.
Okay.
And I was always amazed at how people responded to that. They would tell him.
Sure. Sure. If you don't ask, you don't know. You'll never
That's right.
know.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I learned from Lowell. And then, Remo was all innovation,
Yeah.
right? And then Vic, right? And Vic just wanted to grow and grow. And, Vic, he was not just a great timpanist, and he was the youngest member ever hired from the Boston Symphony Orchestra. I joined the orchestra when I was 19 and still in New England Conservatory. And then, let's see, with Vic, um, yeah, he was, when I joined the company, he was also chair of the percussion department at New England. And so he just needed somebody that could help him grow the company. And we had a great staff. We had great people.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've always been fortunate with is to have great teammates,
Right.
right? Great people.
Well, with
Uh,
with good
yeah.
with good leadership, though, Rick, because when you have leadership that understands that and gets the right people together and sees that, that's important too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so Vic and I were a good leadership team. And then we had Neil Larrabee, who came from, he was out of Boston University, but he came with a deep understanding and participation in the DCI
Right.
core stuff. And then he had developed the mallet line for Vic. And then we had Chuck Moulton, and then who's now at Zildjian. And we had, of course, Kelly and Tracy Farth. And then we had uh, brought in Marco Saccoli for
Marco,
artist
yes.
relations off of 48th Street.
Just on Marco, I'd known Marco since then, actually, because I used to go to New York as a
Yeah.
student in the mid 70s. When I was in Montreal at McGill University, I would go to New York every month to study with different people. And I would always go into the store at Manny's and then, all the stores along that was that 56th Street.
Well, no, Manny's was on 48th Street.
Oh,
Yeah.
48, yeah, 48th Street. And then there's a bunch of stores that were right along there, right on the same
Yeah, you
side.
had Terminal Music, you had Alex's, you had Sam Ash,
Sam
and
Ash.
Manny's.
And
And then across the street there was somebody that was specialized in reed instruments. I can't remember that name, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I still remember it. And I used to run into Marco, Marco being he was always wired ever since I remember. I think that's the best word I can think. And I knew him
Yeah.
from back then. So later on, when we're in the industry and I'm playing everywhere, and he's working with the different companies that I was endorsing also,
Right.
it would be just funny that we'd always meet. And we spoke Italian, of course. So we'd be talking about everything about Italy. And yeah, I mean, that's one you miss, Marco.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and I remember,
What an energy.
we'd sell something to him, right? At close the sale, and he said, "Okay, we got to celebrate now." I said, "What do you mean?" So go into the cymbal room, and behind a stack of cymbals was a bottle of grappa, and you
Of,
had to have a shot of grappa
of
to
course.
close the sale.
Grappa's good for you.
Well, I'm glad because apparently I had a lot of it back then.
Oh, wow. But an
Yes,
interesting
yeah,
an interesting thing also with Vic Firth and Louis Charbonneau. Louis Charbonneau, the timpanist, because when I first moved to Montreal, I was studying with Pierre Beluze at McGill, and there was the team of people, the percussionists, who had all studied with Saul Goodman, were like the next level people, were all the Montreal Symphony guys and like the guys. And Louis Charbonneau was making his own sticks at the time, which I still have those timpani sticks and those snare drum sticks. And then Louis himself told me that at one point he said to Vic, he says, "Why don't you make your sticks here? I have a great place." So Vic's original sticks were being made in Montreal apparently,
yes.
and so they had, and it was really funny watching them at that beginning, and then Vic really took off with his thing, and Louis Charbonneau just closed it up, and he was not into that world of business and making, but it was beautiful sticks though. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember Vic talking about that, and yeah. Then actually, when I joined him, um, they had bought a one of the factories that was making the sticks in Newport, and then we ended up making everything there. And it was an old plant from Civil War era, and sitting on a lake in Newport. And yeah, so after I joined, we brought all the production into that facility, and we again had a great team up there as well. You know, so again, I did Vic for 10 years. Did a lot of touring. Actually, did some playing. Vic and I did some playing together
Okay.
because he wrote drum set and timpani duets, and so we did a tour of Australia, drum set and timpani. And
Wow.
then we did a tour of Germany. And I'm sure there are people still humming those tunes that we played, you know.
The greatest hits. I just had a flash. You remember Remo came out with the Timpanellos, okay,
Yeah.
way back, and Vic was endorsing them, but also he was promoting them, of course. And I mean, I bought those Timpanellos. I still have them, in fact.
You're talking about the Rototom
Rototoms with pedals.
with
So
the
the
pedals,
tunable,
yes. Yeah.
yes, and he called them Timpanellos.
Yeah.
And Vic wrote music for the four Timpanellos, which were, I forget, like I think there were 10, no, 12, 13, 14, 16, something like that, but pedals, so you could pitch them. And I we I bought those way back because I thought that was the coolest thing because we could take them on the road. And when we
Yeah.
did symphony appearances, we would do these contemporary pieces. Like there's this one piece, Déjà Vu by Michael Colgrass, that required, I think, all this pedaling, but I think it was written for 5 or 6 timpani, but all the pedaling. So I said, I was playing the timpani part. It really saved me because I could, put some of the pitches right in between the drums. And that was brilliant. And I still have them.
That's nice.
Not too many of those around.
Yeah. They were good. We had a lot of uh, some quality issues with the pedals for a period of time,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
we discontinued them. I want to mention Dom Famularo because this was during my Vic time.
right.
And Dom and I were close friends and did a lot of projects together through the years. And And I was going down to New York because I had some business down there. I let Dom know I was coming down. And he said, "Well, you want to go hear some music?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." And, I was thinking, well, you want to go here? You want to go there? I said, Dom, I want to go crash some weddings because nobody gives the wedding drummer any love.
Interesting.
He said, "You
Interesting.
serious?" I said, "Yeah." And on Long Island, there was a couple of big banquet houses, and they would have, multiple weddings going on at
Sure.
the same time. And so we just, put on a sport jacket and, whatever, and walk in
Just walk
and
in.
just walk in. Yeah. And
Okay.
then go stand next to the drummer until he looked up at us. He said, "Can I help you?" And then Dom said, "Yeah, this is Rick Drumm. He's president of Vic Firth, and we're here to do a stick bag check."
Nice. Listen, Dom came to Costa for 20 years. And I mean, so I know exactly. And those who had the opportunity to be anywhere close, he was permanent with us. And and I had to protect him sometimes from more about that later. But yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Oh yeah, I think we hit 5 or 6 weddings that day, and always got cake, and occasionally got a drink with an open bar. And then, since there was this one time the band director, the band leader was looking at us, and he said, "Is there something you guys want?" "I just want to look at a stick bag."
Back in the day, where before my time, the union guys would go around and make sure everybody's a union member. That reminds me of. Let's see the sticks. Let's count the sticks that
Yeah.
you have.
I sent everybody some free sticks, it was just to do it for fun. I said, "Look,
Beautiful.
yeah, nobody shows you guys any love." And I was feeling bad about it, and I thought we should show up.
Wow, I think you made their day. That's fantastic. Great story.
Yeah, and then also one more story while I was at Vic had to do with um, actually it was at the Montreal Drum Expo, and I was backstage, and we had the Vic Firth drummer shoes that were like endorsed by Dave Weckl,
Right.
and um, bottom line is the music stores didn't know what to do with them. You could never have the right sizes in stock and all that, so it was like a nightmare. So I was wearing not the drummer shoes, but I was just wearing a regular pair of black shoes, and this uh, manager from Zildjian, who was in charge of the Zildjian sticks, John Sorensen,
Yes.
saw my shoes and started making fun of my shoes as they were like, the drummer shoes. And I said, "Okay, John." I'm following that in the back of my head here. So John and his wife were having a new arrival, right? New child. And I found out when he left to go on his family leave. And so I called John King, down in Zildjian, and I said, "I would like to make a delivery of every single pair of the Vic Firth drummer shoes into John Sorensen's office." And I came down with literally hundreds of pairs of shoes, and we got them all the way up floor to ceiling in his office. And then I put a little post-it on his office door. And I said, "John, congratulations on the family's new arrival. Rick Drumm, have shoes, will travel." He could hardly get in his office. They were really stacked in there. And then Craigie called me up and said, "That was a really funny thing you did, Rick. Now come down and get the damn shoes."
It sounds like her. That's funny, Rick. It's really funny. You say a lot of shoes to fill here, John. Beautiful. Wow.
And so then, let's see, continuing on the journey, let me know when you've had enough. Uh,
Okay. We're good.
uh, I got a call from a headhunter. I've been at Vic for, like I said, for 10 years. And I should also mention something in here, and as part of the journey. When I came out of high school, I had won a scholarship for North Texas State University, as it was known back then. Right.
Right.
So I would have been at the college in 1974. No, actually, the fall of 73. And, I've a lot of reasons. I didn't take the scholarship and I just got a gig on the road and then I went in the Air Force and all that stuff. So now I'm at Vic and I decided that I did want to go to college. And so I went and got my undergrad. And now I'm working on my MBA at Babson College. I went and that's where I got my MBA. So I'm finishing out my first year of my MBA at Babson and, running Vic. And then I get a call from a recruiter asking me if I'd be interested in applying for becoming president of D'Addario. So D'Addario was a much larger company. I loved Vic, but also like the potential challenge if I was going to get this gig.
Right.
So I went to New York, met with the recruiter, and then he had me meet with each member of the board of directors. And three of them were not family members,
Okay.
right? Outside board members. And the last guy I was meeting with was a guy by the name of Craig Coy, who was the CEO of Massport. So he ran Logan Airport and the Port of Boston. And they brought him in after 9/11 to fix the security lapses,
Okay.
right? Because he had a little history with a position at the NSA, National Security Agency. Fun guy. So anyway, I went to Logan to interview with him up at his office. And then I went back to Vic to finish out the day. I did that over lunch. Then at night, I'm driving home and I get a call from Jim D'Addario asking me how the interview went. I said, I think it went fine. And he said, good. I have one more interview for you. And I said, Jimmy, I've already given you all my best shit. I got nothing. you know all my material. And he said, no, you got to do this one last interview. So, okay, where? He said, Boston. I said, okay. When? And he said, this is on a Monday night. He said, I need you to be in Boston Wednesday afternoon at 3:00. Can you do that? I said, yeah. I said, who am I meeting with? And he said, Jack Welch. Now, I don't know if you know the name Jack Welch, but Jack used to be
No.
the CEO of General Electric.
Okay.
So
Oh
kind
yeah.
of he was like the
Seen the
Miles
name.
Davis in the business world, so to speak, right? And he was no longer with GE at this point, but as I had to go interview with Jack. Jim had gone to this weekend with Jack at the Four Seasons in Boston, and there were 100 business owner and execs there, each paying 10 grand. So um, it was a cool million for Jack for the weekend.
Wow.
And um, Jim and Jack kind of hit it off, and Jack asked him, what's your biggest challenge? And Jim answered, well, I need to find somebody to help me run the company and help mentor the next generation of D'Addarios. And Jack said, I'll tell you what, when you get down to what you think is your final candidate, I'll interview him for you. So anyways, I ended up being that guy. And
Okay.
then the next thing I know, I'm knocking on the door of Jack's house at 3:00. And his assistant comes down. Is Rick Drumm? I said, yes. Why don't you come out to Jack's office? He's not here right now. He's running a little late. So I said, oh, okay. He was at a Red Sox press event because this baseball player, Johnny Damon, who played center field for the Red Sox, was moving to the Yankees. And so, fortunately, I followed that back then. And I hear Jack come up the stairs. Rick Drumm here? Yeah. He comes whipping around the corner. Rick Drumm, Jack Welch. What do you think of Damon going to the Yankees? That was his first question.
Wow.
And I said,
The
well,
deal breaker.
I said the Red Sox offered him 40 million and the Yankees offered him 53. And all he's got to do to get the extra 13 million is have a shave and get a haircut. And I said, for 13 million, I'd get a shave and a haircut too. So that's how it started. So I do this hour and 15-minute interview with Jack, and I was amazed at the line of questioning. He really prepped for that interview.
Wow.
I had called one of my professors at Babson, letting him know I had this interview with Jack, and he just said, my, we have moved into the fast lane, haven't we? And then I said, what am I supposed to do with this? He said, just be yourself. It's all you got. So,
Right. Nice.
so anyway, Jack thought I was a good match, and then I took the job with D'Addario and was there for 8 years.
Yeah, and for people who don't know the Dario, I mean, they not only the strings, but also Evans, Promark, HQ, and a whole bunch of others. I mean, that's a huge, huge company. And
Yeah, we were the largest musical accessory company globally.
wow,
And when I started at D'Addario, we had 600 people that we employed on Long Island. By the time I left, we had 800 people. The company had grown considerably. Again, we had a great team of people. And while I was there, yeah, we had acquired Promark. So now I found myself in this interesting scenario of now competing with two of the companies that I managed and helped grow, right? So now, like, Bremo calls me up and said, "You're working for D'Addario?" He says, "Of all the damn companies."
of course. Oh wow, that must have been so. Yeah, no, no. I was watching you going from one company to another as you're going up your own journey, and I'm saying, "Well, that should be cute." But no, seriously, because
Yeah, and
I
then we buy Promark, and then now I'm competing against a
right,
Vic, right?
yeah.
Which
And
I had
Mike
not.
Mike Robinson
Well,
was there.
what happened there was we were at Vic. Um, we started making Zildjian sticks,
Right.
right? And then because they were having some issues down at their factory down in Alabama, and then uh, I left, and um, Vic called me up and said, "I'm going to sell the company." And, why don't you talk to Dario, see if they want to put in an offer? And he said, I'm just going to be talking to a few parties. I said, okay. So I talked to the Darios, and then we put in our offer, and it wasn't what Vic was looking for. And so Zildjian ended up buying them. All right. And so, but the still wanted to be in the stick business. So they said, well, what do you think? I said, well, we can try to buy Promark or maybe Vader, or we could do a Greenfield. We'll start from square one. And they said, why don't you call? So I called Maury Brockstein. I said, Maury, have you ever thought about selling the company? And he said, well, it depends on the day. And I said, well, how are you feeling today? And that's how
That's
that started.
interesting. Wow. No, I remember. Yeah, I remember. But Mike Robinson was first with Dario, and they're developing the heads and stuff. And I was one of the first endorsers who came on board, and they had me down, and we worked all kinds of ideas, and
Yeah.
it was really interesting. Like you're out in the field when people are manufacturing you on your one side, when they get your opinion, and they mean it because we
Yeah.
know what we're dealing with on a daily basis, whether you're playing, whether you're teaching, and all the touring and all the conditions that whatever you're playing goes through. then
Right.
so you can speak volumes about those kinds of things, and I think some of the companies who understand that go go far, like, and Mike would just pick my brains, and then they would do an event and have everybody over and talk about it, and it's great to see that every day you're playing or you're doing something, and the issues or you're mentally taking notes, and then it's great to be able to share them with somebody who is going to do something with that, because you may not have the time or the inclination to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And, we're always looking for new ideas and, what is something that you could sell a lot of? Because you can always make one and sell one of something, but that's
Yes.
not a good business model.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although there's a lot of drummers thought that we should do that, but and then, one of the developments, two of the developments that I was involved with at the Dario, uh, one was the level 360 um, concept for the drum head, which got a patent on, and that just changed the angle of the collar so that it would fit the bearing edges much better. So you had the
Right.
plane of the head, right? So if this is, what you wanted, it was this. And on some of the couple of the Remo heads, they were having an issue where the bearing edge was hitting right on the edge of the collar. And in order to correct for that, you just had to tension the heck out of the head and make it stretch and reform essentially. So the level 360 solved that issue. And then the other one was the Select Balance series of drumsticks. All right, so we had the forward balance and the rebound balance. And the whole concept there was to try to provide the vast majority of players with a stick that was going to be a good fit in their hand of the right length and give them the response that they wanted, because there were the guys that wanted the stick to do most of the work, and then there were the guys that liked that forward balance where they were really um,
Sure.
working that hard, like a lot of the hip hop drummers and things like that.
Right. And I mean, there's a lot of development, and I've seen people. There's a guy in Italy who was making some sticks, and he came up to me because I spent a lot of time in Italy. He says, you have to try these sticks, and they're really. I mean, the weight was so forward; it was like here,
Yeah.
and it's like my hand was like falling by itself.
but
But I said, "Wow,
but then you got to pick it up again.
exactly, yeah, yeah. It's a great exercise stick." But I mean, it's really interesting how much the beads, how much the shape of the bead, where the weight is. That's a whole science. Yeah,
Oh
beautiful.
yeah, yeah, and also the material, and
Yes,
then remember Joe Porcaro had his diamond tip sticks,
yes. I have a set
and
of those. He
yeah, they were they sounded great on the cymbals, but they were hell on the heads because of that the way that they were cut. The head manufacturers loved them, but
right, right. Yeah, I mean, some of those ideas were great for certain things, but
yeah,
yeah, yeah. No, I even came up with it was a brush pedal brush. The beater was a brush like over 30 years ago, and I remember when I was playing, I was a Pro Mark endorser way back, and I had approached Pat Pat Brown.
yeah,
And I said,
mm,
I'm into this hybrid stuff. So one of my bass drums, I have a second bass drum, but I said it's 14-inch by 2 inches. So it was a frame drum that I made into a bass drum, but I put a brush on it, because sometimes we do things with hand drumming with a brush. And I said, well, why not put that on a pedal, you
yeah.
know? So I would mix that up, and then they said, nah, that's never gonna. I mean, you can sell 10, of course, that's not gonna be enough. I still use it, by the way. So,
Yeah.
so I'm happy. And sometimes some of the things that I do, these sound might come out. And, what is that? So it's interesting. But at least it gets you creative out.
Yep.
It may not
Yeah.
sell a million, but at least it gets that idea and gets it for you what you want to do. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, you got the exclusive on it, Aldo.
yes, thank you. And I will have for a long time, I think. Yes, I own that one. And but then you went on. I mean, I know you do a lot of consulting and your own because I mean, this whole journey you've had and all this experience. I mean, that's phenomenal that you've been able to do this, but not just on an entry level, but from the top. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting to see someone who's a player and takes such great interest in being able to run these corporations in the music world.
Yeah. And so I was, after my time at D'Addario, actually, even a couple of years before that came to pass, I had decided that I was going to be a coach. Whenever this gig ended, that's what I wanted to do. And the reason for that was a couple of years before, let's see, it was probably 2010, 2011, maybe. I hired a coach.
Okay.
Uh, I hired the coach for myself and also John D'Addario III. And it was an interesting experience. Um, and so I got a lot of good out of it, and I think John did as well. John's now the CEO of D'Addario, has been for a few years. And um, when I decided I wanted to be a coach, I didn't want to do coaching exactly the way I was coached, but I knew that I had these experiences and I wanted to work with the business owners and their leadership teams. And so for the past 13 years, I've been coaching. I've coached about 65 different companies in a wide range of industries. A couple, like Sabian's one of my clients. They actually were my first client,
Okay.
and they're still with me. So then I got actually I got a group of drugstores in Ontario. That's a longtime client. They're doing very well. And then I got the company that is a contractor for the United States Navy for aircraft carriers, nuke subs. And then I got a little bit of everything.
Wow. Wow. That's talk about entrepreneurship. That's amazing, and also being so wide. I think that being a drummer really helps.
Well, it does because, well, one of the things, like if you're going to be successful for the long term, right? And I've listened to, even talking about Antonio Sanchez. And I think one of the things that he talked about, which I believe in wholeheartedly, is you got to take it all in, right? And all of these influences, right?
Yeah.
And then you take those, and then what I like to do is cross pollinate something that I've learned from over here, and I think that this company over here could use a version of that or whatever. And again, working in all the different industries that I've worked in, number one, you got to remain curious, right? You got to be a lifelong learner, right? So those you got to have that, and um, you got to go in there with, especially if there's an industry that I know nothing about, which is kind of my favorite thing to do, because you get to become a 4-year-old again, because you don't know anything, you may not understand anything, and you get to ask very innocent questions about why, what causes this, and like they're really, really simple questions. And if they can't answer them, then
Good point. Yes.
I know I can do some good here.
Yeah. And also not knowing all that much about a certain industry gives you in some ways an upper hand because you don't come in with preconceptions,
Right,
which are so anchored and inked in that you can't remove those, even if you wanted to, because you don't know, right?
right. When you come in with right unbiased eyes,
Yes.
you see things that the company has stopped seeing and shouldn't have stopped seeing. And, it's actually my first time at the Dario when I was at the NAM show. I joined the Dario at the NAM show. It was the last day
Okay.
working for Vic Firth. I had Neil Larrabee, and I took him to Japan and was introducing them. We did Pearl and Yamaha, whatever. And then I came back and I went straight to the NAM show. And this is when they make the announcement that I'm going to be the new president of D'Addario. And on the last day of the show, Jim D'Addario comes up to me and he says, "Hold out your hand." So I hold out my hand, and he said, he has a key. He said, "This is the key to your office," right? And he's like telling me where the office is. You go into the front door and you turn to the right, and your office is right there. I said, "Okay." And he said, "Just so you know, we've had this thing going since 1680. Don't screw it up." And he drops the key in my hand.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
So
No
then
prep.
I went back to the factory, and he said, "Look, he was going to stay out in California and take a couple weeks vacation." And people knew I was coming in, but I was introducing myself. And then this guy who was the vice president of manufacturing, he wanted to give me a tour of the factory. And I said, "No, I just prefer to walk around by myself." He said, "You're going to get lost back there. The place is huge." I said, "I know how to read an exit sign. I'll figure it out." Figure it out. So I did that first tour alone. And then, I was making a couple notes here and a couple notes there. And yeah, I saw a lot of stuff that I knew that we could fix this up, fix that up, and which eventually led us to I talked to the D'Addarios about doing lean manufacturing, like the Toyota production system. And they said, "Yes, let's do it." And I said, "But here's the caveat. We all do it." I know it's not going to be one of those things where say, "Hey, you guys should do lean. I read all about it. It's really good." No, we're all going to do the training, as much as possible, and then we roll it out. And that's what we did. And it made a huge positive impact on the company and the company's customers. Company was already doing very well long before I arrived, but
Right.
we took it up a couple notches, which was a lot of fun.
Nice. Nice. And now, I mean, now you're consulting, and so if you were to give somebody advice, I mean, I know, uh, it's always interesting to hear somebody speak, having done what they've done. Well, in the environment that we're in today, what would be uh, the thing that you would say to somebody listening? Because we're
Well,
obviously at a different
yeah,
time.
if I got a client, which I have several right now, but my advice to my clients is this: you cannot control anything outside of your four walls. Right. So let's just focus on what you can control and get really good at it so that you can adapt to anything that the world wants to throw at you.
Hmm.
So let's get really, really good at that. So there's a book I read some time ago called Anti-Fragile. And that's what I tell my clients. I said, we need to make you and your team anti-fragile so you can handle anything that
Interesting.
comes along.
Interesting.
Right. And the other thing too is um, kind of taking a page out of Remo's book, so to speak, and it's also some of Jim D'Addario's, and that is innovate, innovate, innovate. Right? I think it's really important. You have to differentiate yourself
Hmm.
as a business, just like as a drummer, right? To get a gig, right? How do you differentiate yourself from everybody else? And you could be the greatest player in the world, But if you're a pain in the neck on the bus, you ain't getting that gig.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some learn much later,
Yes,
and the
exactly.
sooner the better. Yeah, no, no, that's really great advice. I mean, it's like, you have you get yourself together. It's like building your house. What would be the house that you would live in? Yeah, then it comes with all of what you're saying. Makes even more sense. Adding that up, make it so interesting, so unique. What?
One of the things that I'm working on, Aldo, is just about finished up a book. And the book is called The Peak. That's the name of my company, Peak Growth Solutions, the name of my company. But it's the Peak Focused Productivity Formula. And what here's a question. All right. What do you think out of an 8-hour day, right, in the office? What are the number of real productive hours out of that 8 hours? How many?
For me, maybe three.
It's a good guess. Right. It's about three. It's 2.8, right?
2.8. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
And then
Yeah,
for manual labor, it's up higher, right
of
around
course.
4.85. But the reason is that there's so many distractions, right? And so you're still teaching, I assume, right? You're
Yes.
still
Oh,
doing some
yes.
teaching,
Oh, yes.
right? And so one of the things that happens with all of our students is there's a great deal of distraction,
Oh, huge.
right? The average number of times that people check this out during the course of a day, just a work day, is 150, right? So there's a big epidemic of FOMO, fear of missing out. And they're always checking it. And what they don't understand, what they don't realize, is that every time they are distracted by this, it can take up to 23 minutes to get refocused.
To get refocused. I always wondered about that because how long does it take to get back? I know the distraction factor, but that's interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's up to there's a study. I'm quoting from a study done by University of California, Irvine, and it's real. I mean, I've gone to a number of, well, not only clients, but also like my brother, Ronnie, who retired from Disney World a couple of years ago or last year. Um, he said that he thinks that number is low with the number of interruptions. So every time you have an interruption, hey Aldo, you got a minute? Can I talk to you about this? Right? And meanwhile, you're into something that you're locked in on, and so um, the the problem is that it could just take you a minute to deal with whatever that is, but then your brain is still partially connected to that thing before you can start to bring it back over to this other thing. And, basically, right, as a player, if you lose the groove, it takes a long time to get it
Sure.
back. It
No,
may not
that's
lock right back in.
yeah. No, no, that's a really good point. And I say that to people that often is your downfall because you're all over the place. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
And
I
yeah, yeah, and the other piece of this is that, and I ask my clients all the time, so how many of you think that you're really good multitaskers? And the hands go up. Okay.
of course.
And I said, okay, well, I'm sorry to spoil your day, but none of you are. Because
Sure.
as humans, we're really kind of wired to do and focus in on one thing at a time. Now, you could have quick movement,
Sure.
but
Sure.
when you start to try to, like, if somebody down the road here is got us on and they're working on something else while they're listening to this sage advice that we're sharing, um, they could make more mistakes. The
Sure.
productivity could drop as much as 40% when you multitask, when you try to multitask,
Right.
right? So your quality of work goes down, the amount of work goes down. And so all of these things contribute to these 2.8 hours or 4.8 hours. Now, what would happen if you could add another hour of focus time and productivity? What impact would that have on the company revenue, profitability, person's salary, whatever? It would have a very large positive impact. And on a national scale, it's like $1.8 trillion to get that
Wow.
one additional
Wow.
hour. That's So this book is called not released yet, but lock in to unlock your focused productivity.
Interesting. I'll be looking forward to seeing that because that's a huge discussion. We see that. I mean, kids growing up, teenagers. I mean, the whole system. We see it because we've been around for a little bit longer. We're
Yeah,
noticing it and noticing it as we grow wiser. We're noticing more and more uh, what's happening on the entry, for lack of a better word. People who are just getting on board with serious things, and that's huge. You look around and people not paying attention, the way they drive, the way they respond to things, the way all of it, and you say, "Am I crazy, or do I feel like an alien that has been dropped here? It all looks the same, but is not behaving the same." Right?
well, yes, in your case, both could be true, though, right?
You know me too well, maybe. Yeah, no, no, it's
Yeah,
but that's
so
that's interesting
yeah,
though.
and so I also have as part of my company, it's called Peak Micro Learning, and so I've licensed. I have 700 courses, micro courses that range in length from 5 minutes to 15 minutes, and that's kind of the way things are going now, and the way things are taught in
Yes.
short bursts. They can retain it quicker. It's broken down, and but it's the way I would think of it, like from a percussive um, standpoint, is like, okay, this we're only going to teach you the first three lines of George Stone
Sure.
and stick control. That's it. Master that, and we'll get you the next three.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, in some ways we do that anyway, but now you really have to be insistent that you do that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow, super interesting. I mean, we can go on for days, and maybe we should have another podcast on just the thought process that
yeah,
that that you've been, when your book comes out. I'd love to do that because I think this is a subject that most of us who are paying attention are realizing that we're doing less of. I mean, maybe not we ourselves because we're at a place where we don't have to do certain things, but people are in midstream of careers or
yeah,
beginning planning. These are things that are the new realities, right? And we should be thinking that way.
yeah. I think one of the things that got me very interested in this whole topic is I like history, and so I was reading uh, like Walter Isaacson's book on Ben Franklin, and also I read the Thomas Jefferson, right, and also John Adams, and I was always amazed at how much those guys were able to execute during their lifetime, and a lot of it had to do with they had different methods of focusing and really accounting for their time and controlling their time,
Interesting.
right? And then was also interesting was reading from Walter Isaacson, Elon Musk's biography, and it's different, right? He's got a whole different thing going on there with the Asperger's, but he thinks in like 5 minute blocks, right? And whereas Ben made a list and said, okay, this is what I intend to do today, and then at the end of the day, and this is what I did today.
Right, right. Wow, interesting.
Very different.
Anyway, I mean, like I said, I really want to pick up on that kind of subject on a separately. If once your book comes out, it would
Yeah,
be
thank
really
you.
interesting. Let's do that. But I do want to thank you so much for being on and taking the time. I know you've been super busy, but kind enough to be on this. I've been looking forward to get you on. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much, Aldo. It means a lot, and to be able to speak with you again. It's been a long time,
Yes.
and I hope we do it again very soon. All
Yeah.
right.
And I'll reach out. I'm serious for sure. And on that note, as I always say, to be continued.